that should be just about done. Make sure you mute that, otherwise it gets me.
Oh, I can see that top right. Post live on YouTube. Brilliant.
Yes, cool. So thank you everyone for coming along to .NET Knots. We are, as you probably noticed, remote this time. Normally we would be at BGSS, but we're not. Obviously, we're on Zoom today, mainly because our two speakers are remote as well, and it makes life a lot easier to do it that way. I'm kind of glad that I'm not having to drive around in this heat as well and walk around to Tesco's and get drinks for everybody, because that often is quite sweaty anyway. We have a code of conduct in place here, and really it's that bottom right hand part there. Be kind and considerate to others. If anybody feels as though somebody is contravening our code of conduct, then send myself a direct message here in the Zoom chat, and I'll endeavour to put that situation right. As I say, normally it would be in BGSS, top left corner, but we are remote today. But come September, likely we'll be back at BGSS, so we still like to thank them. Rebel, we are using their Zoom license today, and normally they would be supplying us with beer and pizza, but as it happens, they're not, because it's very difficult to get it delivered. And then my old company, because I do all the hosting and everything. JetBrains are on there, but actually I need to sort out with them because I didn't use my licenses there for a little bit. They halted my sponsorship, so I need to get back in touch and see if I can get them to renew that. We had a bit of a break, so that's the reason why that's there. In fact, 3 of us on this call are MVPs. So if becoming a Microsoft MVP is something you're interested in, and that is something that is awarded to folks who do this sort of thing, so either arranging and organizing meetup groups like this, or doing like Marcel and Matteo happen to be doing today, and speaking at events, or producing open source code, or contributing to Microsoft activities in general, then you can run along and get awarded an MVP, and then you can work with the program groups and drive the direction of products and that sort of stuff, and have fun over in Redmond. So Marcel, Matteo, and myself will happily speak to you about that if that's something you find interesting. Tonight we've got Matteo Amelli talking about, we're still talking about security in your development lifecycle in 2025, which wouldn't all fit in the meetup group description because they only give you about 50 characters to play with. And then following on from that, after a short break, we'll have Marcel talking about how we can supercharge VS Code, GitHub Copilot using instructions and prompt files. So that should be good as well. Looking forward to those two. And on July 10th, we have got another Avanade along with myself. So Christoph Cremon will be talking about the agents of change and how agentic AI is revolutioning every industry. So that should be good. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we did at the Avanade Intelligent Garden that won gold at the Chelsea Flower Show this year. And what I did there, where I deployed a Raspberry Pi and an AI kit to detect pollinating insects through the garden. And then we've got summer, so we won't have another meetup at .NET Knots until the end of September, most likely. So do keep an eye on your emails and Twitter for when we announce that one. And with that, I can stop talking and we can pass it over to Matteo. So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen from Zoom, and then we're off.
As far as this particular session goes, this is a conversational session. So basically, I imagine that it'll be a case of just shouting out, come off mute, and ask questions as Matteo goes.
Please.
But do feel free to put stuff in the chat, and I will raise it if that's not something you want to do. But really, feel free to get involved in the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And again, feel free to stop me at any time. Let me just move the cameras here so I can see people on the on the far right of my screen. But thank you very much for the intro, Peter. Thank you very much for joining this session. Note on here the emphasis of the word still. Are we still talking about security in the development lifecycle in 2025? That is the question. We're trying to get an answer to it, and we're trying to get answers to why we should and how we should be talking about that. But we're also trying to find the answer of why we should not be talking about security as an afterthought in 2025. I'm Matteo. I work with Peter and Marcel at Avanade UK and Ireland, but I'm also Microsoft MVP in DevOps, and I've been one since 2010 for the past 15 years. I tend to write on the link at the bottom left. That's my blog. And if you want to connect on LinkedIn, that's the right-hand side link. Feel free to get in touch. Like, I receive questions on the regular, multiple questions a week on all sorts of topics. I'm always very, very happy to entertain any question and try to discuss. And sometimes it goes very much into the rabbit hole of details, which I find incredibly interesting. So when we talk about software systems, right? I am Italian, but I am by no means biased in that. I tend to think of systems, working systems, as pizza. And it might seem weird at the beginning, but in reality, it's very much an accurate depiction. Because first of all, everybody likes pizza, and everybody has got to, ends up eating pizza at some point in their life. It's incredibly rare nowadays for someone not to ever eat pizza, because especially the gluten-free alternatives are really good. But it's such a common, it's one of the most common foods in the world that it's in immediate comparison to all the software systems that we use. Think about it. You wake up in the morning, you pick up your phone has got your alarm, you interact with the phone. The phone by itself is a very complex software system. You open an app by itself is a very complex software system, etc. So modern systems are like pizza for me. And I don't like the spaghetti code analogy, even if it's extremely accurate and topical. But at the same time, a good software system is like pizza because you start from a very good base. You add, generally speaking, sauce, you add cheese, and then whatever topping you like. Now, this is the ideal software system, if you like. And we can go on into all the philosophical conversations about, okay, you got the base and you got the sauce and cheese, but one doesn't come after the other and they blend each other. All those beautiful things. Yeah, fine. But reality is, if you pick up those 4 components and you put them into a software setting, you will find that it's very accurate because you've got your infrastructure upon which everything relies on. Then you got your configuration on top of it. Once you have a configured environment, you deploy your application, and with the application come the libraries. So realistically, obviously, there will be a conversation about, the configuration actually comes after the deployment of libraries and application. Yeah, for the same way, the source could come after various toppings, right? But in general, that's something that is very accurate, and it describes pretty much every software system. Also because, as the title suggests, ingredients matter, right? You can go to the supermarket, you can get a pizza. You can go to a takeaway, you can get a pizza. You can get to a restaurant that does many things, including pizza, and you can go to a pizzeria. 4 different places. They will have 4 different types of ingredients, catering to different tastes, different price points, etc. Same story with our software, because you could have your own code base, top to bottom, right? You might develop your own hardware. You might develop every single bit of your stack. Highly rare, but it could happen. You could be using commercial software, commercial off the shelf, low-code, no-code platforms with some extensions. You could be using one of the many frameworks and execution environments that we have on the market, especially in the cloud space. You could be using fully open source ingredients, in this case, so open source libraries application. You could be using open source hardware, like I'm thinking, typical example is, if I'm not wrong, the framework computer. They have all their schematics as open source files, and you can buy spares and replacements, etc. So you can have a mixture of commercial, open source, homemade, or anything in between. So a mixture of. And the reality is, like with pizza, in software, quality and security are paramount. And ensuring that level, ensuring that bar is extremely important, especially when it comes to security, in my opinion, because we'll see in a second, but quality goes hand in hand with security nowadays. They're no longer separated. They're no longer things that you can talk about in isolation. And security is no longer the penetration testing exercise done once a year. You get a book of findings. Those findings are skimmed through a couple of days. Something goes on the backlog. Book goes in a drawer until the next year. That doesn't happen anymore. Well, it does happen, but it's not effective. As much as, very importantly, that we don't have full control of the end-to-end life cycle of our systems anymore, no matter how much you try. Why is that? You surely rely on third-party libraries. That, for starters, is a condition. You probably rely, if you are here, you probably rely on a hyperscaler because of Azure rather than AWS, GCP, Oracle Cloud, Alibaba, whatever. That alone takes away control of your end-to-end life cycle of your system. You don't have your hardware racked in your colo or your data center. You have full control over that. And that's normal. It's absolutely normal. It's 2025. But with that comes the responsibility of quality and security. Most importantly, and that's a conversation that I entertain every day, when it comes to cost and total cost of ownership, whenever you find a bug, the sooner you fix it, the better it is, because it's cheaper. If you find a bug and you call that out when you are defining the architecture or the requirement, it might cost you a few minutes, a day of rework, let's say. If you find the bug whilst you're developing something, that's already more expensive because it might have a knock-on effect or something else, etc. If you find the bug in production and you're breached, then 30x is the estimation of the NIST. I didn't come up with these numbers. It's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. But 30x, that's very conservative nowadays, simply because you look at the news and you have Company A has been breached by God knows what cybercrime group. Company B is completely locked out of business because a crypto locker has locked the domain controllers and the backups and all of that. Like, you will find that those things are way more expensive than 30x. And also, when it comes to control, if you delegate control of your stuff to something else, then you have a very, very high risk that you can hardly mitigate. LeftPad was the perfect warning shot. And if you're not familiar with LeftPad, please go and search that, Google that, have a look at what happened there. I will share the deck afterwards with the link in there. But basically, LeftPad, it was a very, very simple library available on Node.js and on NPM, for Node.js on NPM, which all it did was adding some padding to the left of some text. That's all. That's all it did. One day, the developer decided to pull it and take it out from the NPM registry. And lo and behold, you will find that huge organizations were relying on LeftPad because of convenience. And many, many websites went down, and obviously major incident because services down, service availability, SLAs, and all those things. So remember, whenever you are adding libraries, dependencies, all sorts, you are trading away some control over quality and security. And that is obviously very complex in today's landscape. For any question, please stop me, okay? Please stop me, because I also don't have a clock in front of me, so I hardly have an idea where I'm going with time. But please stop me, because that's supposed to be conversation. Now, in my opinion, developers can and should be empowered. Because it's clear that if we kick the problem down the road, we're not going anywhere. And again, another example, Knight Capital. I strongly recommend everyone that doesn't know the story goes and have a look. An organization that was doing DevOps, in a high frequency trading environment. They were doing all the good practices, all the tools and everything. They went under because they automatically deployed something in the wrong way, and essentially in a trading system, a portion of the system was trading against the other portion. So the company went bust. This obviously means that if a developer has got the ability of fixing something, of remediating something, of improving something, they should be empowered. And the way that we usually do it nowadays is via a development platform, because hopefully gone are the days of someone building their code on their machines, zipping it up, sending it via FTP someplace else, and manually copying and pasting libraries, restarting the servers, and we got the deployment, classic ASP from late 90s, early noughties. I've got the scars. So hopefully today, anyone is using an internal development platform that targets a target fabric, which could be again on-prem, hybrid, cloud, I don't care, it doesn't matter. But you've got something that you interact with as a user experience layer. You've got your APIs behind it. So what you interact with is actually hyper automated. It is extremely reliable. It is super controlled. You've got the ability of connecting multiple systems and multiple services, even if the user experience doesn't allow you to do it, etc. And then you rely on these two things: the graph database of content that you have, so all your assets, all your accelerators, templates, your code. Think about the typical example of, oh, I got my internal library of assets for infrastructure as code, and then I've got my library that allows me to deploy smoothly onto a system, and I've got something else that accelerates the, you know, the deployment of an environment, and so on and so forth. And then you got the orchestrator. The orchestrator is probably the most important thing here, because especially with something like GitHub, but to an extent also as your DevOps, GitLab, and everyone else, you have something that goes all across the internal development platform, and it allows you to raise and or listen to events, which is brilliant because then you can monitor. You will have your internal APIs that you can build off the orchestrator engine. And I'm thinking, and I've done that multiple times, and many other people have done that as well. You got Azure pipelines, you got the hosted build pool. That's your serverless execution environment. I tend to bring it up sometimes. People will look at me with the funny faces, and then they realize, oh yeah, that's actually true. Because Microsoft is going to spin up a piece of infra for you. You can run an arbitrary number of tasks as scripts. That's serverless environment. You can do stuff. I've done all sorts of things leveraging Azure pipelines because more often than not, it's federated with an enterprise environment. More often than not, has got facilitations, like in the case of Azure pipelines, it's got a system-wide token that you can use to authenticate, and it's got a dedicated user behind the scenes that runs the service. So it's also nicely scoped, and you can decide what can be seen and what can be accessed by the orchestrator. GitHub Actions is much easier because it's by design an horizontal orchestrator, so that makes life much easier. But the thing is, you got this IDP orchestrator, and you can do stuff with your orchestrator. Then you can report and all those things, even before, long before you get to a deployment. So there's a number of things, there's a number of ways you can do it. We'll see them in a second. Ideally, 2 ways of doing that, realistically, but we'll see. Any questions so far? Let me see if I can pop up the chat. Is there any question in the chat, Peter?
Nope, nothing at all yet. People
Nothing
just taking it in.
Right. Okay, so 2 ways of tackling security and quality and preventing more often than not. Completely opposite ways. You got the outside-in way of doing it. So if you think about it from here, outside in. So you got an observer that looks at what the teams are doing on a slice of your IDP. And if you have 4 things from human interaction, building, shipping, monitoring, you start from monitoring. So all of those things, you will start from proactive mitigations. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'll show you in a second. You start from this and you get into continuous assurance. So the concept of ensuring that an environment is always secure, is always safe, is always green. Those things can be the first port of call if you use something that's outside in, rather than the other way around. So why do we want to do it outside in? That's because more often than not, if you're starting with this approach, you cannot afford disruptions. You might have a team that needs to ship. You might have all sorts of deadlines, plans, whatever. You cannot afford to disrupt the team with something like this. You cannot pull a handbrake and slow down for a little while. So it's non-disruptive and it's heavily reliant on observability. Case in point, Defender for DevOps. Love the product, right? It's a product that allows you to connect from your Azure environment. You can connect Azure itself, obviously, goes without saying. But in this case, specifically for DevOps, GitHub, GitLab, Azure DevOps. Single pane of glass, pretty dashboard, all of the things that people that don't do platform engineering day in, day out, they want and they need. Because if you have, and again, real world example, you've got an organization, a company that has a single Azure DevOps team project and has got a single organization, everything there, everything self-contained in it, I can guarantee that there's going to be at least a number of repos. Because yes, the best practice is in Azure DevOps in particular, you have one organization, one team project to rule them all, but then you will have multiple repositories. And with each repository, you will have some findings. You might have pull requests not configured. You might have dependencies that are obsolete and dangerous. You might have vulnerabilities in infrastructure as code, and so on and so forth. So if you apply something like this, you go in on the Azure portal, you open up Defender for DevOps, and you see everything across GitHub, GitLab, and Azure DevOps. That's for someone that is not day in, day out doing platform engineering, that is worth its weight in gold, because it allows you for this non-disruptive, observability-driven approach, and it will allow an organization to do incremental work, incremental fixes, remediation, etc. That's one way of doing it. And that's the most extreme, like literally the most outside in. It's you looking at the building in front, right? And seeing that maybe there's a fire. Then you got something like Dependabot. And Dependabot is more interesting. More interesting. It's a slightly different take on this, but is way more vertical. Dependabot looks at vulnerabilities in libraries, in third-party libraries. In this case, these are a bunch of vulnerabilities from old versions of Ruby libraries. My blog runs on Ruby, so I just took the opportunity of picking up an old screenshot. Now, this is interesting because, yes, it is completely embedded into GitHub, but realistically, Dependabot will work behind the scenes. It will raise some alerts, and you don't have to do anything, right? You get the alerts, you get the branch with the pull requests, fixing and upgrading wherever possible and necessary the dependencies, but it's done completely hands-off, outside in by Dependabot. So if you are an organization, and I'm currently working with an organization that's got this problem, with essentially limitless, unfettered access to any form of library on the planet Earth, multiple versions of the same libraries that have not been updated, all sorts. That is a fantastic tool to keep your libraries in check and start doing some remediation. Because more often than not, you will have your branches created directly by Dependabot. And that acts outside in without disrupting anyone, without stopping anyone, without breaking the build and all of those things. If you go one step up, you got GitHub Advanced Security. And Dependabot is part of GitHub Advanced Security, but it's offered separately. So GitHub Advanced Security looks at actual security vulnerabilities. It looks at the hotspots. It looks at things that will likely go wrong in your code from a quality and security perspective. And it's something like this. It raises the CVEs from your code base. It raises SAST vulnerabilities directly from your code without running a scan, right? So it runs off the back of GitHub Actions. It runs off the back of your pipelines. It doesn't do anything more than that, but it runs its own analysis engine. So you can go, you can have a look and see, okay, those things are, those are dodgy because in this case, the cookie accepts stuff that's without the bound characters. You can have an overflow exception trigger from that. In this case, obviously low severity for obvious reasons. But there are others which are more interesting and they will have a higher severity. And whenever you go and look at it, the advisor will tell you, look, it's impacted here. You can fix it in this way. You can replicate it in this way. And that's the reason why we're raising it. All of those things are outside in. It doesn't stop developers. It doesn't stop a team from shipping. It requires a team to pay attention. That's the big thing. Before I go on to the other approach, any question?
I mean, there's a cost associated with at least that Azure Defender for Cloud, isn't there?
Yes.
And geez, I just looked. If you've got APIs you want to cover, you want to be damn sure you're going to do it because it's $200 per subscription per month to cover your APIs.
Yes.
Wow, which I've not looked at before. But the rest of it looks reasonable. I mean, you're adding and adding and adding and adding, but it's $10, $15 per thing but it's not a one for all price on that.
Well, think about it. Defender for DevOps, $200 per subscription. But it gives you that single pane of glass, that convenience, that takeaway experience, if you like, right?
Yeah. Yep.
GitHub Advanced Security, you pay, I think it's $39 plus an add-on for $19, something like that, right? And the $50-60 total. But what you're getting is something that's heavily coupled, tightly coupled with your development platform.
Yeah.
Now, GitHub Advanced Security, and we'll see that in a second, has also got a sibling for Azure DevOps, but it is not the same product and it acts in a completely different way. So it very much depends on the situation. If you've got a number of development platforms, and I will gladly go back to the screenshot because I feel like it's very, very effective. If we go here and you go number of repos on GitHub, number of repos in Azure DevOps, number of repos on GitLab, does it make sense to have it? Or does it make sense to duplicate security and quality solution across the board? The answer is always down to the single organization, it's down to a single company, because you cannot have a single answer. But if you lost control, as many organizations unfortunately do, then this is the best way of getting a lay of the land and understanding where things are without costly assessments. And I know I'm shooting myself in the foot because I work for a consulting company, and more often than not, we start with an assessment. But in this case, anyone can start and get a flavor for what's the situation of my environment. If you go with GitHub Advanced Security as is, as GitHub Advanced Security for GitHub, then you only get a portion of that visibility. And if you have other platforms, that could be a problem. That also includes ungoverned platforms, because as we know, BYOB or rogue IT, if you like, doesn't stop at devices, but unfortunately it extends to services as well. And the beautiful thing about GitHub Advanced Security is that it's at enterprise level. You can enroll organizations inside the enterprise, which means that even if someone else has got their own organization, they can be added to the enterprise and they can be covered.
Couple of questions there on Dependabot. Does it cost money? I think it's free.
No, Dependabot is free. Dependabot is part of GitHub. Everybody gets that. I think even the free tier, I mean, I haven't used the free tier for years, but even the free public tier has got Dependabot. It's part of GitHub's efforts to keep software safe and safer every day. I'm trying to see if I can get the button for the chat, but I can't find it. Yeah. But no, it's completely free, and it's rolled out on GitHub across the board.
Yep. And Ian, you've got a question there?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I used working for Next. I'd used JFrog X-Ray, which was, but like you're kind of sounding like a suggestion that with it, when I did it, I had to actually create templates and things like that and run them as part of my pipelines and stuff to actually say, here's a testing phase, just check all the code and whatever. But you're kind of sounding like you're just saying this is just all external. You just need to kind of point it in the right direction.
Correct.
And it's going to do it and not be a stage in your CI.
Exactly right. Exactly right, Ian. This is pure outside in. It's based on observability. It's based on the fact that it's deeply embedded with the platform, or it sits outside the platform and uses observability hooks. So you don't have to do anything more than purchase the license and connect the service.
Cool there. Yeah.
That's and again, for some organization, like I worked in an organization that was heavily federated. Defender for DevOps was a godsend, because all we had to do was literally just getting, back then it was a PAT, personal access token, for every organization. We didn't have to change anything. There was no additional licensing beyond Defender for DevOps, and we got the full view of the 50 plus organizations that were involved. So that was a godsend back in the day.
Is that kind of, I think there's Prisma. Is it Prisma that does that do something similar?
Yes, something similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Might be worth noting as well that the GitHub Advanced Security licensing is per committer as well, so it gets expensive pretty quick.
Yes, it can. But it's also true that it's very complicated with licensing, and it's not a topic that I particularly enjoy, if I'm honest, but there's always a way of doing it at enterprise level rather than organizational level and all of it. So it becomes almost like a bespoke suit at that point. and there are all sorts of ways of getting licenses in different channels, different ways. Like there's a number of options that, frankly speaking, we don't really.
I think I'd be quite like the fella that had to set up the JFrog X-Ray. He had a bit of a time because it's an Israeli company apparently, and he had to go jump through many hoops to basically get an Israeli company to be able to do this job.
Right. I see.
I don't think he would do it now though.
Cool. The other option, you remember all the beautiful things, the 4 icons and the number of options of things that we can do, are starting from tools and metrics for developers. Polar opposite, right? Completely different. And why? Well, that's because it's more involved, yes, but it also gives you a lot more control, gives more control to the individual team rather than relying on a central entity. It's more granular, it's more customizable. So the typical example, SonarQube or SonarCloud. I love it. I can't help myself. It's a brilliant tool. I can only recommend it. The guys do a fantastic job. The teams do a fantastic job of putting out an even better product every time. But there are other options compared to SonarQube and SonarCloud. So it's something that scans quality, security, a bit of libraries, and it does sort of an all-in-one package. There's another alternative called Q1 that does a sort of similar job. But this is something that you have, as Ian was correctly saying earlier, you have to integrate yourself. You have to set it up, or you buy the service by SonarCloud, you integrate it with your pipelines. Every scan, every time you run it, every environment, and every branch, most importantly, will count. And it's something that you have to manually maintain, feed and water. All those tools are usually based on lines of code licensing. So you have to figure out what's the size of your code base. There will be different sort of licensing, given that we talked licensing before. But it's a brilliant tool because it gives you that single view for code quality and code security with an external tool that some people might like because they might not want to have access to a development tool, but they want to have access to just a dashboard, essentially. And it also gives you a wealth of information, really a lot of information about why is there something, something broken or something that's off, like this one in particular in front of me. This is a scan of an example ARM template from back in the day. And very interestingly, I set up a certain set of rules about infrastructure. Here it's telling me reorder the elements to match the order, right? So you pick up your code standards, you ingest your code standards, and you get recommendations based on those standards. That's brilliant. And obviously you get other things on actual code and actual vulnerabilities. Now, bit of spoiler for what Marcel is going to show later. A lot of those things that I'm going to show in the inside out, like this one that just comes to mind, but also the next one, they can be preempted by having the right prompt files for your favorite model and your favorite agent, right? So you will be able to instruct an agent, you'll be able to say your model to actually do things in a certain way. And it's extremely powerful because it prevents a whole host of problems from being flagged later. So keep that in mind and enjoy Marcel's session later. The other big hitter, in my opinion, and I am an extremely big fan of this, is GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps, because heavily integrated, tightly coupled, but any developer can go integrated with a couple of tasks in their pipelines and then seeing the results directly into Azure DevOps. And for some, that is super important because going, like in particular for procurement, going for procurement for another organization, for another product, etc., as mentioned earlier, it could be complex. This comes from Microsoft directly. It's just an add-on. It's built per repository. So fairly straightforward to set up. And it gives you dependencies, code scanning problems, and secret management. Secret management is really important. We'll see that in a second. But here you can see an example of an RC on .NET Core, just using an old version of a library. You can see stuff on your code. In this case, it's added files from jQuery, but again, used as a demo. But most importantly, typical example of Regis, most importantly is this one, secrets management. And I cannot be a bigger fan of that, because GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps will natively recognize patterns of tokens, every form of token, essentially. There's a list of, I think, 50 plus types of token from all sorts, Azure, AWS, Adobe, JWT tokens, all sorts. These recognizes the pattern. So in this case, obviously, this is a file, secrets.txt, with a personal access token in there. Obviously, that token is no longer valid. It's recognized as Azure DevOps PAT, and it is recognized because of a pattern. I cannot stress that enough. I saw far too many secrets, usernames and password tokens, certificates, all sorts, which were stored into a repository. A tool like this gives you the immediate red flag of, first of all, revoke that credential. Secondly, obviously, you can't remove it forever. But once you invalidate it, remove it from the latest commit so that you don't have to worry about it. And the reason why I say that is because let's assume you revoke it and you remove it from the repo. Even if you rewrite the history, I can always open up the Git repo. I can always get in there, and I can find, obviously with time and effort, I can find the commit where that PAT was in use. Because once it's in Git, it's in Git. You can't remove it. So these will give you the ability of having that scan running continuously for every pipeline, and it will detect those kind of situations. This alone has saved significant amount of money in remediation and significant amount of effort in actually, ensuring that this doesn't happen for large organizations that I work with. Because it happens, it keeps happening. Sometimes it's just an internal system. It's just something simple, but that simple can lead to an escalation of privileges, and it can lead to something else with knock-on effect that gets to production. So I cannot stress that enough. Use something like Azure Key Vault, HashiCorp Vault, something for secrets management. And this is something that prevents you from losing control of your secrets. Any question? Polar opposite approach, similar features, but with obviously, as you can imagine, way more control, because all of this needs to be integrated into pipelines. So, if you've got questions, feel free to send them after if you don't want to talk now. But you need security. You need it in DevOps. That goes without saying. You can't do it at every corner. It's clear that you have outside in from the very top down to the inside out at the lowest possible level and possible granularity. And you literally have a plethora of tools to use. Also because I only just touched on the list of tools that you could use. This is a reference that I usually like to leave behind that shows the amount of tools that are available for every one of this. So we haven't touched on SAST and DAST, for example. We haven't touched on specific infrastructure as code security validation with AZSK, Checkov, you name it. Monitoring is it's a conversation of its own. You will have things like security development lifecycle. It's ever so important, and it tends to be forgotten. So that's a methodology, that's an approach. You can't buy a tool and fix it for you. Using SNCC, Vend, Dependabot again, or white source, like there's a number of tools that could be used. Use this reference as a starting point, and it's categorized by category. Well, categorized by category of interaction. But most importantly, and that's the most important topic of our session, make sure there's a buy-in. Because if you're running an organization and you are imposing a certain direction, because that's how it is, will not bear results. It's going to be like the penetration testing exercise. It's going to end up ignored or worse. And if you are a team that wants to raise the bar, and management or whatever doesn't listen to that, then the other way around. Obviously, you can't just say, oh yeah, we're doing it just because it is, but also show the data. Make sure that it's evidence-based. Make sure that it's clear why certain things are needed. Because it's really, really important. And it's a collective responsibility of the industry to make sure that that is propagated as much as possible. Any final question? How are we doing with time? Okay, good.
Any questions, folks? Is there like an open source stack that's free? That, because obviously we spoke about this, that there's a cost involved. Getting buy-in, that's often the first hurdle.
Yep.
Even actually pricing it in the first place can be complicated. And certainly if you're just starting a project and you don't quite know what you're building, pricing it then is just finger in the air.
It is. And when it comes to those kind of tools, there's all sorts of open source free alternatives. I'm thinking OWASP Zap itself. I am thinking Dependency Track, brilliant tool that is deployed as a system. It's literally a system in a box, gets integrated with your internal development platform, and then it scans the dependencies and gives you nice dashboards, nice reports, bill of materials, really important, and it gives that into standard formats that can also be used by other tools downstream. So that's another one. There's all sorts of scanners for code security, including sometimes the compilers themselves, because I can guarantee that everyone has tried your favorite compiler at least once with all the warnings and errors turned up to 11 on code quality and security. They are there for a reason, right? So the good balance is let's enforce what makes sense into every step of the life cycle. From a feature branch, some of them integration branch, some others, if you have an integration branch, if not, if you go straight to main, a different set of obviously practices. That's important. It's a good balance. The other thing that's important is that when you use a tool like this, like one of the many tools that I showed today, those tools can and should be configured. Don't just take the out of the box setting because they might be okay for the very first steps that you take. But then if you start ignoring things because the tool is not configured the way you need it, then it's pointless. So make sure you invest some time into proper configuration, into proper analysis of the rule sets, etc.
Very good. Any other questions, folks? Oh yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Really cool talk, and I appreciate the way you've categorized them into outside looking in or inside looking out. Sometimes it's hard to categorize these tools, and I appreciate that. I would like to ask, could you talk a bit about the timing aspect or the frequency? So are we talking about like what's a good practice to do? Is it on every release, maybe a nightly kind of a scan, that kind of a situation? Could you touch a bit on the frequency?
Absolutely. Brilliant question, Mario. So the difference is, let's pick up the tool reference so that we got all of them. So if you start outside in will run continuously. You don't have a frequency. You don't have anything that says, oh, scan every bill, scan every 24 hours or that. That's continuous. And that's why outside in is very powerful, because it gives you that immediate view that shows you, oh, that's where the problematic hotspots are. When it comes to inside out instead, given that the team owns configuration and deployment of those tools, it's important to strike the right balance. As I said earlier with the rule sets, but again, similar thing. What I like to focus on, for example, is that on an individual feature branch where I'm just building stuff, okay? So I'm not even deploying, but just building, there's going to be a number of rules. And then you move to deployment to a development environment, and those rules will change because it's not just your feature, but it might be integration with other features that you need to take into consideration. Also, you start talking about continuous assurance at that point, because imagine you're deploying, and that's a typical example, right? You deploy to an environment and your build works, is green, but the deployment doesn't because someone has tampered with the environment. How do you know that? You have to manually get in there and validate that, I don't know, port 8047 that you use for something is actually used by something else, or the firewall has not been opened, someone has made a change, etc. So having those things integrated into the release pipeline is the way forward. You have to ensure that you strike the right balance. Once you get beyond development, so you say, okay, I'm fine with my feature, I'm ready to ship. I need to get onto the release train if you do safe, or you want to have, you have the actual push to production. Then you start adding other things. So, for example, static security testing, good practice to run on every development environment. Whenever you deploy to a development environment, do it, right? Because when you're building, fine, it doesn't really matter. When you are integrating, then yes, please do, because there will be things that will be flagged. The dynamic security testing should happen before production, because you might be ready to go. Everything is lined up, ready to ship to prod, but it's a more expensive process. You have to run different tools. They take some time, and those are things that will run against the live environment. So you deploy to pre-prod, and then you integrate the dust tools, for example. That's where you integrate them. If you are shipping a product, very important, use a malware scan. It doesn't hurt, because I saw libraries containing malicious code that was not flagged because it was just dormant. And the malware scan will take the security testing results, essentially, will take the static security testing, the dynamic security testing results, but then it's also going to scan the binary in its entirety. So you will have code level, binary level, and environment level validation together. If you're shipping a product, you need to scan your binaries. You need to scan what you're deploying. All the others, it's a balance. So software composition analysis, every build, right? Because you need to ensure that your libraries are safe. Code quality scans, again, every build, because if you're using a different set of tools, different set of rules, then those will apply differently compared to environment. You can run them every time. And it's a balance, again, because of time that elapses. If you're running everything for every build, your build is going to take half an hour. If you're running just the right things, or hours even, if you're running just the right things, then it's going to take much shorter. You have a better feedback loop, and then when you integrate, you will have a much better baseline to work upon. Make sense?
Yep. Thank you so much.
Very good. Any more questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Matteo.
Lovely.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
And we'll let you go to your appointment wherever you're
Thank
going
you.
now. You've got a prior engagement, so
Thank you.
I'll let you go do that.
Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you
Yes.
soon. Cheers.
All the best.
Cheers,
See you,
Matteo.
Matteo.
Thank you, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Yes, Daniel, I will send the presentation offline to Pete that can then publish that afterwards.
Yes.
Cheers up.
It's also on YouTube, so
Yes.
you can catch up there too.
Of course. Bye all.
Yeah.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
And if we have a break just for a couple of minutes, just to let folks go refill their glass of water, if nothing else, and we'll come back in just a couple of minutes and we'll continue with Marcel. Assuming Marcel's still here,
Yeah.
See you in a minute.
Cheers.
Hello.
Hello.
I just had a quick 2-minute break.
Ah, yes, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we did just after Matteo's talk there. So we'll give it another minute and then we'll continue with yours.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Oh, my mouse has stopped working. Ah, okay, there it goes. Shall I share my screen?
And I was literally about to suggest you do that. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okie dokie. And choop. Let's do that one. Yep.
It's Marcel.
Alrighty.
Yeah, we'll carry on now. So over to you, Marcel. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Pete. Thanks again. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and also Matteo for his talk earlier, and to the NOTS group. Thanks, Pete, for getting me a session here on the very short notice. It's quite appreciated. So thank you for the time. And I just want to say I'm Marcel, if you don't know me, deal category Microsoft MVP in DevOps and Azure. Been in the program for about 5 years now. Now, the topic I'm going to chat with today is basically what Matteo was hinting on earlier about how you can use instructions and almost like create prompt files, which you can use as personas almost of or tools that you want to use to quickly run a something like a quality code, a quality code quality scan, or a security code review, or maybe updating a README file and things like that. So we'll have a look at a few different ways that you can do this using GitHub Copilot chat, and where you can kind of enable it, how it works, and all that stuff, that cool stuff. There's two things we're going to look at: is the instructions that you can give to like your entire code base of the the current project or the current repository, or the prompts that you can kind of apply to with specific tools or kind of personas, really. I want to say, going to look at infrastructure as code development practices using Terraform in this demo. An example you can see here, I've got like VS Code open with GitHub Copilot enabled. So before I do anything here, let me just quickly see who of you are using GitHub Copilot chat already. Is there
Oh yeah.
And via VS Code, everybody, I'm assuming, I guess. If not, I think it is free now to everybody to use. So definitely have a look at it. It does help you quite a bit with your peer programming and things like that, right? This assistant. So, and you can apply this. Like I said, I'm using this for infrastructure as code Terraform, but you can use this on any sort of code base that you use. So, first of all, to enable this, you need to go to your settings in VS Code, and you can then go to something called instructions. If you do that in not here, it's your settings.json. If I just go in here, just one moment, I'm trying to find that. The file opened just a minute ago.
It's hiding.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Oh, here we go. So you can go into your settings.json file, and there's an area here called github.copilot.chat.code generation instructions. You get different types. So for example, you can use different tools. So in my case, Azure is a tool to go or an extension to go and look up how how to, looking at Azure kind of best practices or things on Azure. You also have, there's also different instruction sets that you can use for things like not just general instructions, but for example, you can have code generation instructions, which is this one that I'm showing, or you can also create, and I'm just going to copy this, pop that underneath here. Sorry, I'm just going to copy it from this line here. You can have, if you want to do test generation, you will just create a new section called GitHub Copilot Chat, and you can do test generation to do test generation instructions. You also have review selection. So, for example, it comes up here anyway. It says review selection enabled, but then you'll use the one that says instructions. So you have to enable it as well if you're going to use that. And you also have commit message generation. So when you try and do a commit, and I'll show that as well in a minute, you have this lovely thing here called commit generation instruction. So, for example, if you need to have a certain amount of characters in your commit, or make the summary a bit smaller or more descriptive, you can give those instructions in there. And you can also do pull request description generation for if you generate pull requests. So just to show you what that looks like, I've not got any of them set up, but for example, if you the commit message code generation. So for example, say you make a small file, a small change to a file. We'll call this change this environment to UAT, and save it. You will see here is where you will put your commit message, but you don't have to actually type it. You've got this generate commit message with Copilot button here, and then that basically tells you what you just did, update environment tag in the vars for dev to UAT. So you can kind of give that certain extra instructions to say, this is too long. I only want it to be, I don't know, 20 characters maybe, or 5 words or 6 words, but it's basically giving it instructions in the settings file. Now, that might be, that's going to be your VS Code wide kind of place where you want to do that. If you want to do it just based on a repository, you can create a file called, for example, under the .github folder, under the root of that folder, you can create a file called GitHub-instructions, Copilot-instructions, or MD file, and it is a markdown file. You can then also point this file. You can say, first of all, where does it apply to? In this case, it's applying to all of this repository or this code base. And then what's the project's general coding standards? Now, if you've already got a wiki or an MD file with general coding instructions, you can actually apply that. You can say, go and apply that to all my code that I write, that gets generated from the GitHub Copilot. You can also use, always prioritize security best practices, favor idempotent solutions, use British English, for example, when in spelling, naming conventions, and you'll see here these are like best practices for basically for Terraform, for how to use naming conventions, what files to create, what creating resources or data or output. You can even point it to like Microsoft Learn websites to go and check maybe what's best standards or naming, resource naming restrictions, or what Azure provider to always use. So you can kind of give it quite a lot of instructions that how you just want it to behave when you ask it questions based on your code base and practices. And like I said, if you've got like some documentation already, that's quite handy because you can then just point that instructions into that file. So you can have something like, coding structure and organization, naming conventions, resource management or lifecycle management, variables, anything that your kind of tool or application that you're building uses or relies on, and basically for testing and code quality and all that sorts of nice things. Now, that is also based on your whole code base, like I said. To enable that, again, you go to settings and you can go to a setting called instructions. This is I'm going to show you how to do that in the actual settings here. And there is metal. So let me just quickly find that now. Where did it go? So I'm just looking for it 1 sec. Oh, was typing in the wrong. It is. Oh, goodness me. Just going to navigate my mouse back here. So it's want to type in here in the settings. Use instruction files. Use instruction files. And then you can kind of tick that on to say, you can see here, it gives you a note as well. It says to put your instructions in, go and put it in the GitHub folder, the GitHub folder, Copilot instructions. You can also do multiple files as long as you have .instructions and .md. So it could be Copilot set .instructions.md and then set to .instructions if you have multiple files, or you just you create the one file and you can point it to other files in that file. So this is a pretty cool feature, but one that really sets out for me is the prompts functionality. So for example, to enable that, you would go to settings again as well, and you can use, say, use prompt files. And you have to, whoops, is it use prompt? Let me just quickly see what that one is called. Just wait for one moment here. Okay, so that is under prompt files location, sorry. So by default, prompts are set under a folder called prompts. Under the git.github folder, you create a new folder called prompts. But if you've got a different location, they're also markdown files, and I'll go through them in a sec. But you can do that by doing prompt file location. If you wanted to change that, you'll see by default it uses just prompts, but you can add more different folders and basically how you activate this and what you can do with them. And just go through the general structure of it. So I have 3 prompt files here. One's called update readme. One is generate a TF module structure. So for example, you'll see here my Terraform modules are kind of grouped in like these things here. I'm building a foundation, maybe module, and then a storage module for different environments, etc., etc. Whatever your solution is building, whatever solution you're building in Azure, for example, using infrastructure as code. Now, I have a README file that can explain how to, how to use this to basically these modules for Terraform. But if I make changes to the code, I want to maybe capture those into this file. You'll see here I don't really have an updates section or a latest section. Maybe I want to code review the code base for using specific tools like TFSec or TFLint. Maybe I want to create another module. So for example, 06 module, but use the same sort of structure that I've kind of used in my previous structures for grouping these resources together. And how you can do that is I'll do this one first. So I created this file called generate tf module structure.md. And if you use GitHub Copilot chat just natively on your code base, you will see here you have three options. One is called ask, one is agent, and one is edit. Then you also have your model selection that you can use what models you want to have analyze your code. So in this MD file, you start with your kind of description of what is this prompt going to be about, what modes it's going to be in. So for this one, I'm going to use agent mode. What tools are available to it? So is it GitHub repo and codebase? Now, if you use tools in GitHub Copilot, you'll have this configuration button here that says configure tools. And these are basically the tools. You get a couple of built-in ones, like, the GitHub repo, for example, is to search GitHub repos online on GitHub, or it gives the descriptions next to them, actually. So it's a search GitHub repository for relevant code sources or snippets. And, if you start using MCPs, which is the Model Context Protocol server, you're starting to get more tools available to you. So, for example, maybe you'll be able to create a pull request on GitHub, or maybe build something in Azure or analyze something in Azure if you use the Azure MCP configuration. But these tools are basically what you would define what it has access to, this prompt. Maybe you don't want all the tools enabled for a specific thing. You're not going to maybe updating a README file, you're not going to need maybe all the tools for that. You might just need like a couple of tools. And then you give it a description. So it says generate a new Terraform modules structure for an Azure resource. And then you kind of give it the persona that you want. This is your goal, is to generate new Terraform module structures for an Azure resource based on the templates inside of the GitHub repo, the current repo. Say, for example, your repo is called Contoso/Terraform templates in Azure, on GitHub. So you can actually specifically point it to where it can look for templates of a structure, or you could say maybe this hashtag code base, for example, or this to look at the local files, for example. Ask for the module name and specific requirements if it's not provided. And you give it like these instructions: requirements for a module, create these files, apply the bit, modules, what's the module's purpose, and then specifically ensure that these things are there. So if I now to activate this prompt, you basically just type / and then I'm just going to clear my chat here. So you just type the name of the MD file. Oops, I just made it a bit shorter there. So gen tf, oh my goodness, gen tf module structure.md. And that will now basically invoke that instruction. So it knows that it goes and looks for examples, and it's going to ask me the module name. So I want to say one is going to be a, what have I not got there? Key vault, maybe. Let's do a key vault. It's going to be the name of my module. Oops. And let's just do key _vault. It's asking me what's the primary resource type. Again, it's Azure Key Vault, and any specific requirements or additional resources should be included. Might be enable just create a file structure. Just the layout of the files. So let's see how well it handles that. And now it's going to basically see it's created a Key Vault folder for me there, and a new folder called 06 because it's followed that structure. And now it's going to start creating these main files. It's actually going and trying to create these, the stuff that you want in it. So for example, I put in my instructions that I want private networking, for example. I want best security practice. And here we go. There's the files are starting being populated here. And you can see that it is basically following the exact same structure as my previous ones. Now you can obviously go through that and sanitize that further and go further with it. But you see how convenient this was for me just to invoke that prompt to go and do this for me, and then I can review that afterwards. So I'm just going to stop it here because I don't want it to run its course during the demo. We'll look at the next another example where this is quite useful. So for example, let's look at the code review one. Now you'll see here the mode. I've just said ask perform Terraform security code quality review for the provided code. Check using things like tfsec and tflint by running those commands. Now I have tflint and tfsec installed on my machine here, so it can actually invoke these commands on the code base and then make sure that provide a summary of the findings and analyze the results, validate and like the input and all that. So if I invoke this guy here, I'm just going to clear my chat again. Whoops. So I'm going to undo all of those things and just clear the context. Okay, so next, okay, it's trying to save that again. Let me just take that back. Next one we're going to run is code. Oops. Code review sec.md, and let's see how that performs. So it says I'm going to perform a comprehensive Terraform security and code review on the code base using tfsec and tflint. And you can actually see it's going to try and invoke that command, tfsec. Let's see what happens if we run that. Oh, and immediately we see there's critical issues here. Network ACLs is not blocked. Sorry, network access doesn't block by default for my, and then I can say do a tflint. Say anything wrong there? Yep, there's things here wrong. There's missing version constraints for the provider. There's fixable tags and things like that. Now, what I could even do further is these results that get analyzed. If I use the GitHub pull, create issue, for example, tool, I can then say for each of these things, go and create an issue in my repository or a work item for to get generated and created in my project on github.com. So you can go even further with that, and instead of going and looking at these and creating issues or work items you can just instruct it to go use the MCP server for GitHub to just go and create those with the details and everything padded out into those requests. So that was a pretty cool one. So I've just stopped that again because I don't want to let it run through the whole course. Now we'll look at the update README. So say for example, if I make code changes, I want to be able to document those code changes in my README file maybe. So for this one, I'm using edit mode, and I'm going to say update the README documentation file with new changes. That's kind of the description of it. And then just give it that persona. You're a documentation specialist. Use the README, use the existing README file, and you can point it where that is as a guide. For example, ensure a new section is consistent with the current style, the formatting for Markdown. Update the README file with the new changes at the beginning of the file, but with a latest section header. And you can say maybe and date. If you want, oops, let's do that, and date. Let's save that one quickly. Do a commit. There we go. And use Markdown to ensure that the README file is properly formatted. Now, if we invoke this one, update readme.md, and we'll see how that goes. And it says there, I'll help you update the README file with the latest security and code quality review findings. Let me first read the current README file now to understand it, and then it's going to say, let's create the section that I wanted to create for the findings recommendation. Let's see. Okay, I'm just gonna so I can also invoke commands to run. I'm just gonna cancel all of this, but you can see here it's created a new section, which is maybe it's because I've done quite a few bits before here. Let me just quickly undo that one and clear. Sorry, I'm just going to clear the context. I don't think I cleared that context. So to do that, you just do /clear. And then we'll just do that one again, update. I think it kept the previous context that I was working on the security side. So update readme.md. Let's see how it goes this time.
How much of this is available in Visual Studio, Ian's asking, rather than VS Code?
This is a tough one. I am not actually sure. I know that GitHub Copilot is in Visual Studio, but I don't know if any of these are in the full-blown one just yet.
I mean, the docs say so, but when I look at it, the docs look like it's VS Code, not. But I've not used. Last time I used GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio, it was a terrible experience.
Yeah,
I didn't particularly like it, having used it in VS Code since the start.
yeah.
But it looks like, if that is Visual Studio, it looks like they've got parity in, at least in what it looks like now. So
yeah,
I think it's possible it's there.
yeah. Let me just stop this one quickly because I think I'm going to give it a little bit more detail here. I'm just going to undo that. I'm just going to put in this instruction here. Only use, just to say, look at the last 10 commits in the repository to uninfluenced recent changes. Only, let's see. And I'm just going to push that one up. I'm going to clear this context again and do update. Update. Might need to like play with it a little bit to get it how you work, like tweak your instructions a little bit more to get it exactly how you want to work. And I can give you if I can give you a recommendation, is start small with this. Don't maybe just put one or two things and be very specific with what you want, because otherwise you might end up with maybe not what you want. Sorry, update readme.md. Okay, let's see if it uses the. Okay, so now it's going to say it'll start examining the last 10 commits to see what's changed. So I can then go and look at what those were online and log that. It looks like it kind of knows all the Git commands to run and what's happened, and it will try and kind of analyze. I could also have in my tooling here, I could also say GitHub repo or maybe some of my MCP server tools that I have that connects my project direct, so I could go and directly look on GitHub if at what rather than running Git commands, for example. But we'll see how it does. How it does with this one. Now it's got all the details I think that it needs to see what's happened in the last 10 commits. And hopefully it will update the README with a little bit of usefulness, useful information. Sorry, while this is running, is there any questions so far other than the other one of whether it's in VS Code?
Not at the moment.
Sorry, in Visual Studio. Okay.
Yeah, no, but feel free to come off mute, anybody, if you've got a question at this moment in time.
Do you find yourself switching between the different models very often, and you kind of found that one particular model is better for some tasks than others, and how have they lined up?
There is a way. Let me just quickly check. Okay, this is running here.
We were having this conversation in an MVP group just this morning, funnily enough.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's there yet. Oh, sorry, Pete.
I was going to say, no, I mean, it depends on what you want, but for agent mode, we were talking about this morning, interestingly, and you'll see that's what Marcel's got selected down there. Claude Sonnet seems to be very good at that, although it's less deterministic. So I made a little demo video about creating a tic-tac-toe game with agent mode, and I found that if I started with 4.1, so just the regular OpenAI model, then I could get it to repeat what it wanted to do every time there. But if I did it with Claude Sonnet to begin with, then it would be creating different things every time. It's a lot more creative. But so maybe starting with 4.1 and then switching to Sonnet for that creative, iterative process worked really well for me. A lot better than 4.1, which seemed quite rigid. So yeah, that was one thing that I spotted when I was doing that.
There's
Yeah,
actually.
I haven't had some. Sorry, I was just going to say, like, I haven't had much luck with the OpenAI models. To be honest, I'm almost always using either Claude or Gemini in Copilot.
Yeah, interesting. It's good that they're available to us now and we can try them. I really do think it's just use case specific and how you work with it and what sort of prompting you use and that sort of thing. But certainly that deterministic and creative difference is most certainly there, no matter what between those. It just seems a bit more rigid, the OpenAI models.
I did find for myself, when I'd used Gemini, it started suggesting how I might do this in GCP and how, because I was doing some Kubernetes stuff and like, oh, this, so you're deploying it into GKE, obviously. No, it's not.
No.
Sounds very helpful for me. So,
well, yeah, if you're in GCP, certainly be useful. I mean, it's going to be trained that way, isn't it? So, and the OpenAI models are likely to be a little bit more Azure centric, just given where a lot of the money came from.
Yeah, there's actually a website here that I wanted to show you. That's quite good. It's a community run thing. It's called lmarena.ai, and you can actually go and do your own tests and comparisons. But these are, like, for example, based on scoring and voting for what people perceive for them to be good at text or web dev, text to image, or and you can run your own tests and kind of competitions and stuff on here, and it gives you a nice overview what's in the leaderboards at the moment, and these change over time. So you can see that for text, Gemini is leading the score here at the moment, but it's very marginal. You'll see here that the scoring is pretty, almost. It's very marginal. The voting on the other side is very different. But for example, web dev, you have this one here, DeepSeek, Gemini again, Vision. We have Gemini again, for example. But O3 is it's a good site if you want to have a look. At text to image is GPT and you can kind of see what other things are out there at the minute, and basically the overall scoring of models. And yeah, it's a pretty cool site. It's a pretty cool site, lmarena.ai. If you wanted to ever have a look at that. Pardon?
I think I've just put it in the chat. I think I have anyway. I just typoed it. No, that's it. Yep.
Yeah.
You've got dark mode on.
Yes, yeah, sorry, it's just too bright, the normal one.
Just in case it looks different to folks when they go to that.
Yeah. Well, so you can see here, this is a little bit better. It's given me some dependency management. There's some things I've done earlier in the day, setting up the demo. Just it's kind of captured those sort of things. You know, I can go further now and run a Markdown lint test if I have that installed on over here, or I can use maybe a tool from my MCP tooling list here, for example, and you know, stick that in the prompt file, so you know, you use those tools to kind of go and do these things that you want to do. Maybe you have a Markdown linter tool that you can utilize to kind of lint through your stuff and give it like specific instructions. Pretty neat, right? It's pretty cool stuff, because you can now kind of almost target in your daily life cycle, development life cycle. You could kind of almost target certain things more specifically, rather than wondering what it's going to come up with. But like I said, start off small, be very kind of specific and accurate with what you're asking, because you see there I had to change this to use the last 10 commits only, for example. So if it's a bit vague, it could start hallucinating, or maybe not hallucinate, but maybe give you undesirable results, I would say. Yeah, I think that's about it really that I wanted to show and talk about tonight. Don't know if
that's very good.
No. Marcelo, sorry, I was just going to jump in there.
Go ahead.
Just you said like in the hallucinations and stuff. Have you found that can happen quite a lot, or is it? Do you find that you have to be very specific, or is it quite forgiving, or is it specific subjects that's not very forgiving? Things like, because the only kind of things I've really used was like an AI for like chef or something like that, which was a kind of dev chef or something like that, which was creating I was creating a game just to see what it could do and stuff like that out of the prompts, but it would totally forget all the validation I asked to do and things like that, just ignore me and then tell me that it done it, then it tell me that, you know, it's like, yeah, I've done that, and then 3 or 4 times later you're still kind of asking it. And how did you find the language, I suppose? Is it that sort of thing? Is it kind of like a really specific language, or is there anywhere you can go to get better? Because I'm really inherently bad at searching for things, because somehow my search criteria always put in the wrong things, and people come along in about 2 seconds to find it.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just wondering if there's something out there that will just help me be a bit more. Do I use AI to actually get my prompts?
Yeah, and this is the tricky thing, right? Like, because how do you ask it, like, or maybe you know, maybe you use the wrong word or an incorrect word, which can confuse it. So one thing that I've found is that if the chat generation or the whatever you're asking it is going down a rabbit hole, just clear the context. So by running /clear, you can kind of start from the beginning, you know, and look again at your things here, and maybe think about you. Sorry,
you just think like what you're saying, like from earlier, just kind of try and just maybe do a little simple steps, maybe build it up and sort of roll it back again, and just kind of keep going until it does it properly.
Yeah, and you can actually ask it, you know, how can you help me write? I want all the code to be validated in a certain way. What's the best practices? Can you help me write a prompt to give you that instructions in a better way? And it will kind of give you maybe things that you've not thought about to put in the instruction. It might just add a little something or a word or that you've not thought of. Another thing I also come across is that the models are, depending what you want to do, the models are can be like what Pete just said. He starts with 4.1. Maybe the model is not right for your task. Maybe you should look at a different sort of model.
So you can use that, change it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had some success as well by kind of mixing the process up a little bit and first using agent mode to get Copilot to like write a document with a full plan for the thing that it needs to implement, like as kind of implementation documentation for a future instance of itself, to then actually go ahead and implement that. So it kind of then can make sure you've got all of the information collected in one place without any of the rest of the mess from the context window, because you can start a new context with potentially a different model. In some cases, sometimes the one model is good for planning and another model is good for actually implementing it. And then you can just ask it to go ahead and implement the plan.
So would you then kind of like, so you would normally, like, you would maybe switch that file there, always run that underneath Claude, always do this one under whatever, Copilot or whatever else. But is there a way that you can just say within your prompts to say, I want you to switch to this agent and run the next section?
I don't think that's in there yet.
I'm just being lazy, obviously, but
I mean,
it's worth asking.
I'm sure it'll come, but at the moment the structure is I mean, this is changing also very rapidly, right? Like this could I think I know what you're asking. I think you might be asking here to have another option to say what model to use in your like for example, you can ask the mode, but you can't specify the actual model. You can add into the mode and tools, but you're still kind of bound here. So I'm sure that is coming because I was thinking that as well by started using this stuff. It's like, well, I don't really want to be switching through the models.
If you ask the wrong one and you've just spent a lot of time sitting waiting for it to do stuff. It's just, I suppose so. It takes a bit of time, I guess, but
I'm sure that if it's not, I mean, that it will be
come
there
soon, won't it, really?
Yes.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. I like it.
Yeah,
it's almost like your old style cop and things like that. Really, without all the drama. It's just a couple of instructions.
Yeah, and these prompts work kind of hand in hand with your instructions as well. So instructions is obviously just applied to everything here, but where your prompts, so the instructions, how I like to describe it is the instructions file is the how to do it. The prompt files is what to do.
Right.
Like you have to use this tool, you have to use that tool, you have to make sure this is there. Where the instructions is more like how do you do these things. Nice. Or did I say that the other way around?
The other way around,
the other way around. Instructions is what, then the prompt is how.
You want to do, and this is how to achieve it, basically,
Yeah.
How much of it will be taken automatically and how much do you have to specify? This isn't something I've played with, interestingly, although I've played with pretty much everything Git or Copilot, but just not these files. Just thinking of if you wanted to, there's a standard repo that everybody pulls down so that they do things the same way. Teaching them that is easy enough, but teaching them to specifically prompt against individual files would be another step that they'd need to take.
Yeah. And you could probably, I would probably say as well, excluding files if you wanted to exclude certain things with sensitive.
I was wondering about that because obviously you could take out your assemblies before pushing and things like that, I suppose, but you would kind of hope that you already had filters on your repository to make sure that that didn't get in. You'd
Yeah,
you'd get ignore, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So you would kind of like some of the things would be almost kind of stepping on already existing mechanisms, and I suppose overkill to a certain degree, just for that extra fancy tool, I guess. I'm just getting old, Pete. What can I say?
Well, you and I both, pal.
I mean, you could
There is
probably
I was just going to say there is a
Frank.
concept of excluding specific files from Copilot specifically, separately from do you track it in your Git repository so that it avoids picking up and like training on certain data or incorporating certain data like secrets and things, because you don't want to send those to the LLM. So
I guess that's where you have your instructions you can add that in as an instruction.
Don't use this, exclude this. Yeah.
Quite right. I know the Copilot instructions MD file that you're in now, that's automatic, isn't it? That gets included no matter what, I believe. But I think maybe that the prompts one, you've got to refer to that, I think, haven't you? Ask it to do that. So
yeah.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see how this comes on, because you can put your coding standards in here and all sorts, can't you?
Yeah.
To have it, and you know, I bet you can even do tabs and spaces. Wouldn't surprise me.
You do have to be a little bit careful about how much you put in there, though, I think, because essentially all this is doing behind the scenes is every time you start a Copilot session, it will just send all of those instructions.
Yeah, system
so
prompt.
it just hides away the fact that you just sent all that text. So if you've got too much in there, you'll fill up the context window.
Yep.
Then it will very quickly forget about those things because they'll drift out of the context window.
Sarah, isn't the context window limited as well? I thought that you've only got a certain amount.
Yes, yeah.
Yep. And it varies between models.
Yeah, this is model specific also, yeah.
Yeah.
It's way bigger than it used to be. But it's still a thing.
I think Gemini is possibly still the biggest in Copilot, and that's like 1 million tokens, I think.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I think Gemini is the leader there at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things
and there's me trying to de-Google as well, and I'm trying to get out of all things Google, and it's coming up for me at code levels.
Sorry, Oliver.
Yes, one of the things that I've struggled with quite a bit is I'll say, hey, how do I solve this problem? I'll paste in a bit of a stack trace or a log output, and it'll do that thing where it goes, oh, you need to solve it like this. Oh, sorry, and then wipes itself because it's realized it's sending in kind of protected code. Is there a way that you can like jazz up the prompt so that it doesn't?
The personas, surely, I think, because usually you just tell it as this sort of person, then do this. Is that not? That's usually what I do. Is like I usually say, if you can ask one question and generally it'll ignore you and say that's outside of my bounds, and then you say, as a police officer or something like that, how would I resolve this? And it says, yes, I would just fix it like that.
It's a responsible AI one that gets me a lot. And even just some keywords will trigger that. And so avoiding those keywords, I find, is something I was doing quite a lot just when I was working on a game, a little man flying around, and I was talking about him dying or crashing, and you cannot use those words because it gets flagged by responsible AI. So I imagine that games developers must struggle with this a lot because they're simulating stuff that would get flagged by responsible AI quite a lot. So... Yeah.
Be like that silly Instagram thing with everybody putting like a G in front of graping and whatever else. And what was it? What's the silly one they use for dead killing somebody? Unaliving. You're like, oh my good lord.
But it is a thing, and even just negative comments on things like TikTok will get you flagged and possibly banned as well. There's some. Yeah, I mean, there's a poor guy that goes around, bald-headed guy, quite funny, that goes around reviewing towns and experiences, and he keeps struggling with that because he obviously a lot of the stuff he says is negative, and then
demonetized straight away.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez.
Yes, they're it's very cool. I like what it's doing there. It's really quite interesting and all that. But as a general rule, I'm not as cool with the amount of energy and water and things like that it uses up. So I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's the training actually more than the usage. Although there was a report there about how much using the word please in your prompts costs the world. And
my God.
if you go on a per token usage, apparently it's, you know, being nice to your model often does actually help, but it actually costs quite a lot of money as far as usage is concerned.
It's just trying to kind of battle all the negativity that is out there and it's being used for saying please and thank yous occasionally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, still, let's humanize ourselves still.
Superb.
Yeah. Right, I'm going to
Good.
go and try and put my kids to bed now
Nice
in
one.
this heat, which is going to be fun. And then also try and have some dinner. So I've not had dinner yet. So thanks so much
thank
to, well,
you.
it's left now. Thanks so much to Matteo for his talk on security there.
Yeah.
Really good as well. So thanks to Matteo. And then obviously now thanks to Marcel for the talk on GitHub Copilot prompting. That's
Yeah.
really useful. Thanks to you folks for coming along. And
you.
thanks to our sponsors as well, even though sort of 2 out of 3 of them, we haven't used half of what they needed, but nonetheless, still very valuable to us. So thank you to them. Again, we will have a Knots IoT on the 10th of July, I think it is, with Christoph Kremon and myself doing a little bit of speaking there. And then we'll be back at some point in September. So yeah, we'll see you again soon.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you so
Cheers,
much,
folks.
everyone. Have a great
Cheers.
evening.